what's going to happen and know where you can get out of it, then, in general, on a conventional level, we can say this person has less of a choice than I have in relation to your job. So in relation to that, you say, in relation to the fact that whether I have the wish or not, no way. That is not an option. Versus someone, if they develop the wish, they can do it. If they don't develop the wish, they can't do it. So the external circumstances are such. So that is what I say, relative free will, in relation to that. And that's it. Remember the example of independence. Is Israel independent? Of course not. That'd be ridiculous, right? You're dependent on the weather, we're dependent on everything else. So there's no independent Israel. But I can say, in relation to the fact that the Israeli Prime Minister can make a decision on X, Y, and Z, I can say it's in relation to that, I apply the word independent. I label independent. So it's in relation to some countries that can't make that decision, right? If I compare those two objects, then in relation to this, I can say this is law. In comparison to the fact that a certain child, even if they have the wish to become a doctor, they cannot become. But if you have the wish, you can become one. Only in relation to that, I say you have free will. That's it. Am I making sense? Am I making sense? First, I want to make sure you understand, because that was your question. Does that make sense? But don't expect an independent free will, because of course it's dependent on many factors. However, there is a relative choice in one case, and there's no choice in the other case. That's it. And that's true for everything. It's all relative. Yes?
The wish to be a doctor or a...
Yeah, that's also dependent on other things.
It's also pre-decided before.
It's not pre-decided. It's not like someone decides. There's no God that decides anything.
Not someone, but it depends on
other causes and conditions.
Before.
Yes.
So that's why I wish to be a doctor and not a because...
Yeah, but that's not what I say. I say, let's assume you've created the causes and conditions to have the wish to be a doctor, okay? And you've created the causes and conditions to become a teacher. If those causes and conditions are there, you've created those, and you've created it, and this child in Islam, both have created the causes and conditions, but in one case, you can act upon those wishes, and in the other case, you can't. In relation to that, you say one has free will and the other one doesn't. But free will in that situation doesn't mean you don't have free will in other situations. So in some situation you have a choice, and in certain you wish to do something, but you just can't.
But he also made the
yes, a wish
and the condition and the cause and condition to be in that country that he doesn't have free will.
I know, that's why, of course, it's the result. So actually having a choice is considered to be the result of a positive karma.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I mean. It's like the I. We say that there's no inherent existent I, right?
Yes, therefore, if there were an inherently existent I, you would have actual free will.
Yeah.
Because there is no independent person. You see, the way we understand free will, it's not just an independent decision, but it's an independent decision maker. Right? Because we think of free will as someone being able to make a free decision. Well, that I doesn't exist, and an independent decision doesn't exist. Right? But there's a relative one. Okay. Yes?
You were talking before about karma. You said that not everything is a karmic result. So does that mean things happen randomly, or what does that mean?
No.
So how does that work?
No. For instance, the fact that things change moment by moment. That's a result of causes. The fact that this table disintegrates, that is the result of causes and conditions. So the fact that things are impermanent, but that's no one's karma. Karma is not someone's karma. The fact that actions have consequences, that's not someone's karma. That just is. So in other words, there is the law of cause and effect. And that law of cause and effect, one part of it is the law of karma. Which basically means that volitional actions lead to experiences. But just the fact that things that happen in nature, like the earth rotating, etc., this natural process, it's not necessarily someone's karma. That we experience it is our karma. But that it happens in itself, it just is. That the sun rises in the east, for instance. It just is. It's not like our karma. It's our karma to experience that. But you wouldn't say that this is like a person has created the karma as such. But it's a little bit tricky, that one. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama oftentimes says, he takes away a lot of the things that we consider to be karma and says they're not karma. For me, very difficult, actually. I would say that there are more things karma than His Holiness usually says. So it's very limited, it's very difficult. Karma is the most difficult thing to understand. It's extremely subtle. On a certain level, very hard to understand. Just because, any law, any cause and effect situation is really difficult to understand, actually. If you take a little plant, what is the exact cause of the details of this plant? We can't tell. It's too subtle. Which atoms were responsible exactly for that? So likewise, all our experiences, what were the exact causes that created those? Every action, what will be the exact result? Of what part of what we experience is karma, and like a result of volitional actions, and which part is not? Very hard to determine. Very difficult. So we can discuss it, but in the end, there's no clear answer, unless you become a Buddha, basically. And it's not important to understand. Who cares? It's not necessary to understand. All we need to understand is that positive actions lead to happiness, harmful actions lead to suffering. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask. I'm just saying, don't worry if you don't understand all the details of karma. Only a Buddha will, but to become a Buddha, you don't need to know that.
But you're saying that not everything I experience is
No, not that. No, I'm not. No, I never said that. Whatever you're experiencing is a result of karmic actions.
Everything I experience is...
Everything you experience is a result of karmic actions. So all your experiences. But not everything that exists you experience. So the fact that there's a Buddha, that's not your karma. Right? A Buddha has no longer experiences any karmic effects. So the fact we can perceive a Buddha or not, that's our karma. But that the Buddha exists and that things change moment by moment, that's neither your karma nor my karma. Things just change moment by moment, they just do. Okay? Alright. Yes?
I'm going back to the free will.
Yes.
Actually, again, if we want to, if we don't have free will or relatively free will, I want you to explain how to be able to be enlightened and to transform our mind, we need to change our habits.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I'm studying a bit and I'm about to get angry, and now I can make a decision. Okay, to get angry and to know what the consequence will be, or to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's my free will, or is it a karma, or it's otherwise? If it's not, I will keep on in my.
It's both.
It's both.
Hmm? You have a choice, but it's still the result of actions in the past. You have a relative choice in relation to someone who has no idea anger is bad and will definitely can just explode. Why do we struggle so much with this free will? Because we instinctively believe an inherent existence, an independent existence. So either something exists independently or not at all. That's all. That's why it's so hard. We believe free will, we can make a decision, we're responsible for our actions, but that is true to a certain degree, but not to the degree we think. To us, there's an independent self that makes independent decisions, and if that's not there, nothing is possible. That's it. Really, if you think about emptiness long enough, you come to some point that you go, nothing is possible if phenomena exist not inherently. Right? That's the point we've reached here with free will. It's such a good example. People struggle with free will because of free will means to us, it's a reflection of what we think is reality. There's an independent self that makes independent decisions. That's it. That's why we struggle with it. It's as simple as that. But of course it's not easy to get over it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, why should I practice the Dharma? Well, it's just doing its thing. why do anything, right? It's like, there's no self doing anything, right? Why should I become a nun? There's no self. Why should I want to practice the Dharma? There's just a mind just doing its thing. Right? That's how it feels then. If there is no self, if there's no decision making, well, okay. That's really what it comes down to, let's be honest. Right? And we're trying to find a balance between those two. Just trying to find a balance. So here it's the middle way between like nothing is possible. Right? Nothing is possible because we don't exist independently. And phenomena exist intrinsically, inherently. Right? So nothing impossible means nothing can be existent, or everything exists intrinsically, independently. So we're trying to find a middle, and that's so difficult. It's just so difficult. Because we can't imagine anything without that aspect of intrinsicness. That's all. That's why we struggle with free will. Yes?
Now I go back to a question I asked you earlier, because it's exactly that. Who is monitoring the attention in the mind when I'm observing the mind?
It's a type of mind.
So there's nothing happening. Like,
Yes, a mind is doing something. A mind is deciding, oh, meditation is good. Because you heard about it, because you want to be happy, because many causes and conditions have come together that now one of your awarenesses thinks, oh, I should meditate.
Yeah.
And then it disappears, something else arises, but you already left some, because you had that thought, first seed. And then the thought arises again, and then again, and again, and it grows stronger. And then suddenly you start meditating. But it seems, I know exactly how you feel. What? I'm in charge. I'm deciding to meditate. I became a nun. Right? All my experiences are totally opposite to that. That's why we're saying our misperception governs everything. It's natural. That's why it's so difficult. It's so difficult to see it any other way. And it just takes time. Yes?
A question about all this talk about free will and being locked in. When you think about that we're locked into a culture, and basically what we, that's the way I'm thinking, I'm not saying that.
Yes, we're locked in a lot of things.
And that when we have a certain aspiration,
Yeah.
intellectual inspiration, or even when I look at Buddhism, for me it's a culture. And sometimes I think, will I be even able to make it into this train of thinking when I'm not of that culture? I always think to myself, I have a friend who I discuss with him these questions, he says, well, you know, if you were born in Tibet, it would be a lot easier. Where you are born in Israel, it's a lot more difficult. It's going to be
Not necessarily.
Yeah, so it was just one.
Not necessarily. I know a lot of Tibetans who go, ugh, that culture I'm born in, it's so boring. I want something different. Actually, it can be an obstacle. Because you just think, that's what happens to the young people in Ladakh. It's a huge problem. They ask Westerners to come to teach the Dharma because it's cool if a Westerner talks about it. Because when a monk or a nun, like they look at their own monks and nuns and they're like, oh, those old-fashioned people. They're so kind of what's the word? Left behind, no, fallen behind. Like Jiluteba, what's the word?
Old-fashioned?
Not just old-fashioned, but they've kind of like fallen behind. That's a word for it. In Tibetan, it's like Jiluteba. When you're just not updated, you're just in the old ways, you're caught in the old ways.
No relevant.
Primitive and like you're just caught in the old ways. You're not progressive. You don't want to, right? So if they in Tibetan they call it Jiluteba, when you've fallen behind basically. And so it's not cool. So I don't think it's necessarily the case. It can be an obstacle. But in general you're right. Because you grow up with ideas of past and future lives and with karma, and it's much easier. In general, I think it's true. It's easier, when it's part of your culture. I agree. Not necessarily. So.
No, it's just one. So as a Westerner, you also have to overcome this difficulty, no?
Yes, but difficulties can be good. Can be good, actually, because if everything is too smooth, then it's actually good to face problems because then obstacles are removed. Like if you go, it's like exercising, right? If you want to train your body, and you take that, and you go, right? It's easy, but it takes a long time until you really, right? Versus taking a kilo. Oh, it's difficult. But the result is greater. So difficulties can be good. The only problem is we don't want to experience them. And we run away. It's too much. We want happiness right away. So we're not really willing to go through hardships. So just because it's easier doesn't mean it's better. Okay? But I guess I know what you mean. Of course, in the end, you're born into a culture, and again, you're the result of that culture. But you also created the causes to be reborn in that culture, in the first place. Right? Yeah. So I can see how, in a way, karma, on one hand, seems to suggest we're responsible for our problems. And then again, it's saying, well, there's no I that is responsible for our problems. You see how it can lead to that contradiction? And that's where you travel that narrow way of like extremes. Oh, there's no one making the decision, so therefore I have no choice. But then again, karma is about creating causes and conditions, and I did that, so there is a choice. Right? So karma sometimes seems to suggest there's nothing, and then it seems to, but that's just this fine line where you go from one extreme and you're trying to find both working. You're trying to find a way in which both work. Nothing exists inherently, and therefore everything is possible. But in the end, all you're doing is getting an emptiness. All your questions with free will and so forth, you're all getting at emptiness. And it's difficult to understand because you don't understand emptiness. Because we don't understand emptiness, it's so difficult to understand that. That's all. Right? So once you realize emptiness, you understand free will. Why? Because then we understand relativity.
In 2 weeks.
No.
2 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, there's going to be a course on emptiness? No? What do you mean?
No.
I don't understand.
No, I meant never in this life, because understand empty. Who told us? I think Anila. When we understand emptiness, we are Buddha.
No. You can understand emptiness way before you become a
No,
Buddha.
I mean understand fully.
Even before that. You can fully understand emptiness and not be a Buddha.
Okay.
Okay. More questions? Yes?
Can you talk a bit more about the distinction between Theravada and Buddhism you're teaching?
Okay, Mahayana. Okay. Theravada, main aim is liberation. Mahayana, main aim is Buddhahood. That's it. It's only the goal that is different. Okay? Where the emphasis is more on just being liberated, and in the Mahayana tradition, not just liberated, but enlightenment. So the goal is slightly different. And they all disagree a little bit. Like in the Theravada tradition, they don't believe everyone can become a Buddha. In the Mahayana tradition, they believe just becoming self-liberated, you're not fully utilizing your mind to the fullest potential. But who knows? Maybe one tradition is wrong, the other one is right. I don't know. You just choose the one that suits you best. In the end, it doesn't matter. It's not about right or wrong. In the end, it's what you feel most comfortable with. But it's different goals. Slightly different.
We also can read in this handbook about the two paths.
Yes, and if you read about the path at home, who has read those parts about the path? Oh, one person. At home. Have you already read?
No, we will.
You will? You sure?
I think that in order to really understand it, I have to read it again.
But actually, it would not be a bad idea to read it before class.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, of course, in the end, I can't force you. You're not children and so forth. I can't say do this. But I definitely recommend it. It's just easier to understand it. So, like, you may notice I'm not that strong with the discipline. I mean, that doesn't make sense. Just as a suggestion, therefore. So, if you could read this, great. Of course, if you do it at some other time, never mind. But it answers some of the questions you may have, hopefully. Okay? All right. And it may not be that relevant. If that's not what you're wanting to get out of it, it doesn't matter. Okay? Okay. Yes?
According to higher question,
Yeah.
is how after he's dying, what happens with his mind? I didn't understand.
The mind of an arhat just continues on.
Does it stay in the Buddha state, in the Buddha?
Ah, in that sense.
And then what it goes there?
It doesn't need to go anywhere because there's no karma that takes it anywhere. It's not that clearly explained. Of course, from a tantric point of view, you must have some physical basis there. So you always have the subtle winds. But I don't think you need to take like a intermediate state body or anything. You see, the fact we have a body is because of our craving. It's because there's a wishing mind. There's a mind that wishes to exist. That's why we exist. A Buddha has a wish, or a Bodhisattva has a wish to exist, but only for others.
That doesn't have it.
If you have neither, why would you need to have a body? There's no body that is required out of craving, I want to exist, so that's not necessary. Then there's no body to be there for others. So, there's just the mind. But only for a while, until the meditation wears off. The meditation becomes a little weaker. And then it is said that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas inspire this person, basically communicate to them, mentally communicate to them, well, there's more work to be done, there's more you can do. And basically because of our Buddha nature, then the person is inspired to continue on. Does that make sense? Yes? Yes, Debbie?
I have a question about about the consciousnesses.
Yeah.
Dream consciousness, is it considered wrong? I understand that it's probably mistaken because we're all in ignorance, but is it a wrong consciousness?
Is a dream consciousness necessarily a wrong consciousness? It's an important question. Is it necessarily wrong or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Consciously dreaming?
No, it's a dream.
Then it's okay.
Pardon?
Sometimes if you think that it is a dream, then it's okay.
Okay, in that case, if you know that the dream elephant is really just a dream elephant and not a real elephant, then you're okay. But even without that, even without being aware that you're dreaming, is your dream mind necessarily a wrong consciousness?
You can dream of something that really happens.
In that case, yes. But can it happen that you just have different appearances and you're not saying it's real or not real, you just take in those appearances?